Hi guys, I want to first recap on the stuff that we talked about on Friday, and then I want to finish up our discussion from Friday. So each of you should have completely outlined the chapter so that most of this is just review. Will be a second video that discusses the topic for today, so whenever you make your outline in class today, there's a separate video for that, and that's on the bulletin on the class website. So, recap from Friday. First, we talked about Prince Henry the Navigator of Portugal. He decided that he wanted to help the navigation industry take off, so he founded several navigation schools that taught and encouraged people to start exploring, especially down the coast of Africa, because if you look here, this is Portugal, this is Lisbon, where Prince Henry's school was, and he encouraged them to go down the coast of Africa because it was had not really been done before, and it was right in their back door, so to speak. So, the first two famous people that explored the coast of Africa were Mr. Diaz and Vasco da Gama. Mr. Diaz made it all the way down to the Cape of Good Hope, named the Cape of Good Hope, and then went home. Vasco da Gama, on the other hand, continued the journey around the Horn of Africa, around the Cape of Good Hope, that's the Horn of Africa, and continued all the way until he got to India and helped to establish the spice trade for Portugal. Because of this, Portugal became very rich and became the envy of all the other European countries, and this is where Spain decided that they needed to get into the spice trade as well. So one of their first early explorers, Christopher Columbus, decided that he could sail all the way from Spain and sail west, and he could eventually run into Asia. Now, this was a great plan, except for the fact that nobody at his time realized that there was North and South America in the way if they sailed west. So when Columbus landed in the Caribbean in 1492, he thought he had landed off some islands of Asia. He collected a lot of things, went back home, and eventually made other voyages, each time landing in a different part of North America. Then we get to the Treaty of Tordesillas. Okay, there was a problem between Spain and Portugal at this time because they were the two dominant countries that were exploring, and there were no regulations on who can land where, and the Pope decided to get in the middle of it. So Pope Alexander VI, he drew an original line for the treaty, and this is where it was on the 38th. It was at 38 degrees west in 1493, and it said that Portugal could settle anything east of the line, Spain could have everything west. Of course, that was not quite fair, so both countries decided they were going to negotiate with one another and reset the treaty boundary right here, so Portugal had more of a say. Now, some of you may be looking at the map and going, hey, they're still getting really cheated, but at the time, they were not aware of how big both of these continents actually were, so they thought they were making a fair deal for themselves, and it settled the quarrel for a little while. Now, on to new things. So, we did not get to talk about goals for exploration. So when countries decided to go and explore, they had three main goals, and each of them kind of overlapped. So the first goal was always to spread Christianity. They did not want to go into a new area and fail to spread the word of God. They felt that that was the only way to, one, be saved, and to, two, be a civilized human being. So spreading Christianity to these countries at this time was first and foremost, and plus religion was a major part of their government at the time, so they just had to do it. Secondly, they expanded their empires. They wanted the more land you had, the more part of the globe you could control, the more ships you could have everywhere else, and you could make all of the other countries around you look very sad, at least in your mind. So expanding empires is always a positive thing if you're a king or a queen. And lastly, they wanted riches. Inevitably, you're going to go to war with someone. So having riches or having resources is the third goal, because every king and queen wants to make sure that they are very wealthy so that they can handle whatever's put in front of them and just in general live a very posh lifestyle. So those are your three goals. On to other explorers. So Amerigo Vespucci. He led a Spanish fleet into South America, and he was convinced that he was not in Asia. So it was kind of contradicting Christopher Columbus. And because of his explorations, a German mapmaker that took Vespucci's descriptions of South America, he decided to name the continent, or the areas that he described, the Americas. So that is why we go by North and South America. It's because of this gentleman being convinced that he was not in Asia. So go, Mr. Vespucci. Now, Vasco Núñez de Balboa named the Pacific Ocean. He heard stories from the natives that other explorers had brought back saying that there was another large ocean. He went over Panama, which is the skinniest part of Central America, and saw the Pacific Ocean for the first time and named it to the Pacific. Now, I put found in quotation marks because we all know, or I hope you know, that he is not the first person to find the Pacific. There were Native Americans there for thousands of years. Some of them had traveled along that coast to get into North and South America, so he hadn't found it, but since Europeans in general write the history, they give him credit for naming the ocean. And he claimed that ocean and all of its shores for Spain. Now, if I flip back here, okay, this is Pacific, so that means everything that these shores touch, all the way up, belong to Spain. It's a pretty bold move, but as we talked about on Friday, claiming it and having documentation for it is one thing, but having a colony there and having people that can actually defend and say, hey, we're part of the Spanish Empire, that's another story completely. But step one, claiming it, going back home, and, being claimed a hero, that's what Balboa did. Step one. Another gentleman by the name of Ferdinand Magellan. Magellan is known for circumnavigating the globe. Now, circumnavigate is down here. That means that you sail all the way around. So, this is a map of Mr. Balboa's journey. Now, since the Earth is round, there's not a map that I could find that rotates. So, he started off in Spain, and he was originally only charged to sail down to the tip of South America and then come back home. He decided, hey guys, we're low on supplies, but I really don't think it's that far to go all the way to Asia, so let's keep going. Now, little known to him was that if he kept going, it was a very long way from the tip of South America, and then he ended up back over here, all the way to Asia. Now, he ended up in some islands on the Philippines where unfortunately they were in the midst of a civil war. He and his men got involved and Magellan was killed. And lots of bad things happened to most of his men. He left with 5 ships. They hit the remaining part of his crew, only returned with 1. They sailed out of the Philippines around the tip of Africa and back to Spain, proving that it was possible to circumnavigate the globe, but you need a lot more men and you need to not end up in a place that's in the middle of a war, because you will all come back home otherwise, hopefully. Anyway, Magellan circumnavigated the globe, proved that it is possible. So now everybody knows what continents are there. They know that continents exist. They know that all of the oceans are connected, and that is a very bold thought for this point in time. Now on to the conquering of the Aztecs. So at the beginning of the chapter it talked about what a conquistador is. Conquistador is simply a Spanish explorer soldier. So the soldier would lead an expedition into the Americas. Hernan Cortez is the man responsible for taking down the Aztec Empire. He saw that the Aztecs were very rich. They had a lot of gold, which in the Spanish mind, that was their primary goal. They didn't really care too much about having a lot of natural resources, sending back wood, sending back coal, things like that. They wanted gold because that's what got you rich fastest. Now, he figured out that the Aztec Empire was not governed at Tenochtitlan. That was where their main force was, but all of the other cities that were considered Aztec were just kind of under Aztec control, had been taken over. They didn't like it, and he made allies with these groups that were too small to set a war against the Aztec Empire itself, but together he kind of created enough alliances to take them over. Now, I would suggest that you read about, or you click on the video, you can't do it from this, but open up the PowerPoint slides and watch the video. It talks a little bit about how the Spanish saw the Aztecs and how the Aztecs saw the Spanish. So Cortez used the knowledge of the Aztecs, thinking that he was a god, against them. He was originally welcomed, but immediately He seized their leader. He kept him captive in the city. He made Montezuma give orders while he was captive to try to get the people to give up as much of their riches as possible. Eventually, Montezuma was killed, and diseases eventually decimated the remaining population. So Montezuma was killed, Cortez was removed, Cortez came back a couple months later, held the city under siege, which simply means he starves them out, surrounds the city so that nobody can come in or go out. Disease wipes over the city, and basically the Aztec problem is no more. Problem in the eyes of the Spanish. So a little bit about the Spanish effect on the Aztecs. This video is kind of neat because not only does it show what Spain did to the Aztecs, but also what the Aztecs eventually gave us that we still use today. Now, the other large empire at the time was the Inca. So this map represents all of the entire Incan Empire along the coast of South America. Now, the darker red it is, that is the more densely populated area of the Inca. And this is where they call it the Cusco Valley in your book. So this is the Cusco Valley, and this is where Mr. Pizarro took over. Now, Francisco Pizarro was on Balboa's expedition to the Pacific, and he wanted his own fame and fortune. So he had heard about the Inca Empire that stretched all the way from Chile to Ecuador in the Andes Mountains, and he set out to capture and kill the leaders at Cusco, because if you kill the leadership, the entire empire will fall. They were very well connected. The empire relied on, it had a very vast network. You take down the leadership, the whole empire is going to crumble. And so he took out the leaders at Cusco, renamed the city Lima, which is in Peru, and claimed all Incan lands for Spain. So Spain has, right now, the majority stronghold in South America. Brazil, major Portuguese, so Brazil is over here. It's a major Portuguese area, but other than that, Spain has their territory everywhere. Now, there are three ways that the Spanish conquered the natives, and you need to know these. First, they weakened natives with alliances with their enemies. The Spanish were really good at being strategic. They'd go in, they would observe, they would figure out who didn't like the leadership, and they would make friends with them and encouraged them to fight with the Spanish. Now, secondly, almost accidentally, they would spread European disease. Smallpox was a huge problem. A lot of the Spaniards came with it. They might not have been sick. They could have had smallpox before, but the natives didn't have any immunity to these diseases, so the germs that were no longer bothering the Spanish, when the Spanish would shake hands, they would cough in their direction or something, that would spread to the natives who had no immunity to these diseases, and it would wipe out massive amounts of them. And finally, acts of brutality. The Spanish would not hold back. They had superior weapons. If negotiations by making alliances did not work, and disease was not working fast enough, they had no problem wiping out massive parts of the population, and they could relatively easily because their weapons were so far superior. So let's go ahead and you're going to turn me off in just a second, but the next section is on European competition in North America. So now we are going to talk about new countries coming into North America besides Portugal and Spain, and how they affected Portugal and Spain's standing. So this video is going to end, but this is what it's going to look like. Every time you need to pause, the slide's going to say pause. It's going to tell you which pages you need to read next, and then where to stop so that you can listen to a little bit before continuing on. So before you turn on the next video, read pages 35 and 36 and stop reading when you get to Spain responds to competition.